Right now, somewhere in your skull, your brain is about to spend a third of your life building worlds that don't exist. Tonight, you'll fall asleep, and within minutes, your brain will start generating a fully rendered environment. People who aren't real, physics that doesn't apply, a version of your childhood home with a room that was never actually there. You'll believe all of it completely, for hours, and then you'll wake up and mostly forget it ever happened. You have done this every single night of your life. So has every human who has ever lived. And for most of that time, nobody could tell you why. Here's the strange part. This isn't a small mystery. Sleep itself, scientists mostly understand. We know why the body needs rest, why muscles repair, why the immune system resets overnight. But dreaming, the part where your unconscious mind stages an entire hallucinated experience, remains one of the most contested questions in neuroscience. And the leading answer right now doesn't come from a therapist's office. It comes from a research field that didn't even exist when Freud was alive: artificial intelligence. But before we get to why, it's worth seeing what's physically happening inside your skull while it's happening, because the mechanics alone explain a lot about why dreams look the way they do. About 90 minutes after you fall asleep, your brain enters REM sleep, rapid eye movement, and something close to a power shift takes place. A structure deep in your brainstem floods the brain with activating signals, lighting up the visual cortex, the motor centers, the regions responsible for emotion, almost as intensely as when you're awake. At the same time, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, and telling you when something doesn't add up, goes quiet, dramatically quiet. So does the region controlling your muscles, which is why your body stays essentially paralyzed while all of this is happening. A safety feature that stops you from physically acting out whatever your brain is generating. Put those two things together, and you get the exact texture of a dream. Vivid sensory activity running at nearly full power, with almost no oversight from the part of your brain that would normally notice the plot, doesn't make sense. That's not a metaphor. That's the literal neurological reason you can be talking to your childhood dog in a house you've never lived in, and not once stop to think, wait, this is strange. The part of you that would ask that question has been temporarily taken offline. So the question was never really, why is a dream so weird? Given what's turned on and what's turned off, weird is the default. The actual question is why your brain would evolve to run this exact configuration night after night for your entire life. And that's where the story gets interesting. To understand where the science has landed on that, we have to start with the theory that came first. Because for 20 years, it was the closest thing dream science had to a consensus. In the year 2000, a Finnish researcher named Antti Revonsuo, working out of the University of Turku, published a paper in the journal Behavioral and Brain Sciences that reframed the entire field. His argument was simple and, at the time, genuinely persuasive. Dreaming, he proposed, is a defense mechanism, an ancient one. Your brain uses sleep to run simulations of dangerous situations over and over, so that the neural circuitry responsible for detecting and escaping threats stays sharp. A nightly fire drill, rehearsed in a completely safe environment, so that if you ever actually needed those instincts, they'd already be warmed up. He called it the threat simulation theory, and the data backed him up more than you'd expect. In 2008, researchers Katjavali and Revonsuo collected dream diaries from Finnish university students and ran them through a formal threat classification system. The result? 67.8% of the recorded dreams contained a realistic threat: being chased, falling, getting hurt, losing something that mattered. Almost 7 out of every 10 dreams, statistically, some version of something coming for you. And it got stranger. When researchers looked at how the dreamer responded inside these threatening dreams, the responses weren't random panic. In a majority of cases, the dreamer did something that actually made tactical sense. They ran, they hid, they fought back in a way that fit the situation. Your sleeping brain, even while hallucinating an impossible scenario, kept your decision-making intact. Whatever was generating the nightmare wasn't just terrorizing you, it was rehearsing you. For years, that was the story, and it made sense on paper. Except the theory has a problem that gets harder to ignore the closer you look at it. If dreaming exists to rehearse survival, it's doing an unusually bad job of it. Ask yourself what actually chases you in your nightmares. It's rarely a plausible ancestral predator. It's your teeth falling out. It's a monster with no legs. It's your boss, except now they're also your ex. And also, the building is on fire. And also, you're naked. None of that resembles a threat your ancestors needed to survive on the savannah. If your brain built an elite training simulator for danger, it built one that's almost useless for actual danger. The threats are too weird, too illogical, too disconnected from anything you'd meet in real life for rehearsal to fully explain what's happening. So if it's not rehearsal, what is it? In 2020, a neuroscientist named Eric Hole, then at Tufts University, published a paper in the journal Patterns that approached the entire problem from a completely different direction. Hole wasn't primarily a dream researcher. He studied the mathematics of complex systems, including the systems behind artificial intelligence. And he noticed something: deep neural networks. The systems behind modern AI have a well-known failure mode called overfitting. Here's what that means. When you train an AI system on a dataset, it's supposed to learn the underlying pattern. But if you train it too hard, on too narrow a slice of information, something goes wrong. Instead of learning the pattern, the system starts memorizing the specific examples. It gets suspiciously good at the exact data it was trained on, and then it falls apart the moment it encounters anything slightly different. Engineers have a fix for this. They deliberately inject noise, corrupted images, randomized, distorted versions of the training data. It sounds counterproductive, but it works. The noise forces the system to stop memorizing and start generalizing, so it can actually handle situations it's never seen before. Hole's question was blunt. What if your brain has the exact same vulnerability? You experience the same environment, the same routines, the same handful of faces day after day after day. If your brain trained exclusively on that repetitive, narrow slice of reality, it would start overfitting too. It would get extremely good at yesterday and increasingly bad at anything unexpected. Except, unlike an AI system, your brain can't just pause and reboot with a training patch. It's always running, always learning for your entire life. So Hole's hypothesis, now known as the overfitted brain hypothesis, argues that evolution built the noise injection directly into your biology. Every night, for a few hours, your brain deliberately scrambles its own training data. Familiar people show up in impossible places. Timelines stop holding together. Physics gets suspended. It's not a malfunction. Under this theory, it's the entire point. The strangeness of dreams isn't a side effect of some other process. It's the mechanism itself. And that reframes the threat data completely. Those bizarre, illogical dangers chasing you every night, the ones that make no sense as rehearsal, suddenly make sense as something else. Structured noise, generated in a threat-shaped pattern because fear is one of the most efficient ways your brain has of forcing a strong reaction to something unfamiliar. Not a simulator, a deliberately corrupted training set. There's a piece of supporting evidence for this that most people have actually experienced without knowing what it meant. In the year 2000, Robert Stickold, a sleep researcher at Harvard Medical School, ran an experiment that's since become one of the most cited studies in dream science. He had 27 people, novice and expert players, spend several hours over 3 days playing Tetris. Then his team woke them up repeatedly during the first hour of sleep and asked what they'd been seeing. 17 of the 27 reported the same thing: falling geometric blocks rotating through the darkness behind their eyes, exactly like the game. Here's the detail that made the study famous. Stick gold also included patients with severe amnesia, people with damage to the hippocampus so extensive they couldn't consciously remember playing the game at all. Ask them an hour later if they'd played Tetris, and they had no idea what you were talking about. But when they fell asleep, 3 of them still reported seeing the same falling blocks as everyone else. Their conscious memory of the game was completely gone. Whatever part of their brain was generating those images didn't need it. This is now known as the Tetris effect, and it points at something important. It's not the emotional weight of an experience that most reliably triggers a dream about it. It's repetition. Do something novel over and over in a short window, and your brain will replay a distorted version of it that night, sometimes even without your conscious memory being involved at all. Under the overfitting model, that stops being a curiosity and starts being exactly what you'd predict. Repetition is the fastest road to overfitting there is. Hammer the same narrow pattern into your brain enough times in one day, and that night, your brain flags it and starts injecting noise directly into that specific memory, which means the next time you close your eyes after a long shift, a long drive, or a long gaming session, and immediately start dreaming about it, that's not boredom. That's maintenance running in real time. And this isn't unique to humans. In 1994, neuroscientists Matthew Wilson and Bruce McNaughton at MIT ran electrodes into the hippocampi of rats and recorded which individual brain cells fired as the animals ran through a maze. Certain cells, known as place cells, fired in a specific sequence tied to specific locations. Then the researchers kept recording after the rats fell asleep. The exact same sequences of cells fired again, in the exact same order, as if the rats were running the maze a second time, purely inside their own heads. The rats were replaying their day, cell for cell, while unconscious. That single study helped kick off the entire modern field of sleep and memory research, and it's now been replicated across species. Repetition during the day produces structured replay at night, not just in humans hallucinating falling Tetris blocks, but in the neurons of a sleeping rat. Whatever this mechanism is, it's old. It's not a human quirk. It's something closer to a basic feature of any sufficiently complex brain, running quietly underneath consciousness itself. We're about to get into what happens when scientists question whether any of this actually serves a purpose at all, and it might be the most unsettling idea in the entire video. But first, welcome back. Here's the twist. Not every scientist in this field agrees that dreaming does anything at all. There's a real, seriously argued position in neuroscience holding that dreaming might not be a feature, it might be a byproduct. The idea goes like this. Your brain is doing something genuinely important while you sleep. Whether that's consolidating memories, clearing out cellular waste, or performing basic maintenance on itself. Dreaming, under this view, is simply what that process happens to feel like from the inside. Not the function, just the leak. Like hearing a computer's fan spin up while it runs a task in the background. The noise isn't doing the work. It's just an audible side effect of work being done somewhere else. If that's true, then everything you've ever felt about a dream, the meaning, the dread, the sense that it was trying to tell you something, might be your conscious mind narrating static. Not because your brain is lying to you, but because your brain was never designed for you to be watching in the first place. Which is, honestly, one of the more disturbing ideas in modern neuroscience. Not that your dreams mean something dark, that they might not mean anything, and you're just extremely good at making noise feel like a story. It's worth sitting with that for a second. Because it cuts against basically everything culture has told you about dreaming for thousands of years. Every civilization that's left written records has treated dreams as messages, omens from gods, visits from the dead, warnings about the future, windows into the unconscious. That instinct hasn't gone anywhere. It's the entire premise of dream dictionaries, of therapists who ask you to describe last night's dream in detail, of an entire industry built on the assumption that if you decode the symbol correctly, you'll learn something true about yourself. The byproduct theory doesn't necessarily say all of that is worthless, but it does suggest the meaning might be something you're building after the fact, rather than something your brain put there on purpose. Howell, interestingly, didn't stop at sleep. He followed his own logic somewhere stranger. He started asking why humans spend such an enormous portion of their conscious waking lives voluntarily consuming stories that aren't true, movies, novels, hours of television about people who don't exist, living through events that never happened. Every day, most humans choose to sit down and absorb fiction for no practical reason at all. His theory is that fiction might be doing the same job as dreaming, just with your eyes open. Another delivery system for the same kind of corrupted, unrealistic input that keeps your thinking from calcifying around your own narrow daily routine. Every character who isn't you, every plot twist, every scenario you'll personally never live through, functions as noise injected into a brain that would otherwise just keep overfitting to its own life. Under this framing, the last show you binge-watched and the dream you had last night were, on some level, doing the exact same job. It also finally gives a mechanism to something that used to just sound like a nice saying. Sleep on it. You've had the experience. You're stuck on a problem, you give up, you go to bed, and you wake up with the answer sitting there, fully formed. Under the overfitting model, that's not your subconscious quietly grinding away on the problem, like some office you don't have access to. It's the noise, doing exactly what it's built to do, deliberately corrupting your existing overly narrow way of framing the problem, breaking it apart just enough that a different angle can slot into the gap. Sleeping on it isn't passive. It's your brain actively sabotaging its own stuck patterns, so a working one has room to appear. There's still a basic question sitting underneath all of this that we haven't touched yet. Why do you only remember a handful of your dreams when you have one every single night? In 2011, a research team led by Cristina Mazzano at the University of Rome set out to answer exactly that, and their results were published in the Journal of Neuroscience. They found that the dreams people actually recall, the vivid, strange, emotionally loaded ones, correlate with specific activity in two brain structures: the amygdala, which handles emotional intensity, and the hippocampus, which handles memory formation. For the first time, researchers had a physical explanation for why some dreams survive into your waking memory, and the overwhelming majority simply don't. It isn't random. Your brain is making a real-time judgment, dream by dream, about what's emotionally significant enough to keep, and quietly deleting almost everything else before you're even fully awake. And that emotional weighting seems to serve its own separate function. The experiences that show up most often in your dreams aren't the mundane ones. They're the emotionally loaded ones, the arguments, the embarrassments, the losses. Sleep researchers, including Matthew Walker at UC Berkeley, have proposed that dreaming may act as a kind of unlicensed overnight therapy session, replaying the emotional charge of an event until the intensity gradually wears down. Critically, it doesn't erase the memory. You still remember what happened the next morning. It just, night after night, turns the volume down on how much it hurts to remember it. Which means the uncomfortable dream you had last week about something embarrassing from years ago wasn't punishment. It might have been your brain quietly trying to make it hurt less. Last piece, because someone always asks, What about dreams that seem to predict the future? Here's the actual mechanism, and it's more interesting than simply calling it fake. Your brain runs pattern recognition on your environment, your worries, and your expectations constantly, even when you're not consciously paying attention to any of it. Every so often, one of those background predictions happens to land on something that actually occurs later. That's not prophecy. That's your brain noticing a pattern you never consciously registered and occasionally getting lucky. You don't remember the 100 other dreams that predicted absolutely nothing because there was nothing about them worth remembering. You only remember the one that happened to be right. So here's where 2 decades of dream research actually leaves us. Not with an answer exactly, with something closer to a shift in what the right question even is. For years, the field asked what your dreams mean, what they're telling you, what they're trying to warn you about. The newer, stranger answer suggests that might be the wrong question entirely. The meaning was never the point. The disruption was. Every night, your brain deliberately breaks itself. It scrambles your memories, distorts your sense of time, hands you scenarios so illogical you'd never accept them while awake, and it does this on purpose, so that tomorrow, you're a system capable of handling something new, instead of a system perfectly optimized for a version of the world that no longer exists by the time you open your eyes. Which means the next time you wake up from a dream that makes absolutely no sense, your childhood home with a room that shouldn't exist, a co-worker who's somehow also a stranger, a threat with no logic and no legs, that isn't your brain glitching. That might be the single most important thing your brain does all day. It just happens to do it with the lights off, while you're not watching, and while you're convinced for a few hours that none of it is happening at all. And maybe that's the real reframe here. Not that dreams are meaningless, and not that they're secretly prophetic either, but that the question, what does this dream mean, was aimed in the wrong direction the entire time. The more useful question might be what your brain was doing to you, not for you, corrupting itself on purpose, breaking its own patterns before they could calcify, keeping you flexible enough to handle a tomorrow that hasn't happened yet by making sure tonight never quite makes sense. If this is the kind of question you didn't know you needed answered, that's basically the whole reason this channel exists. If you want more of this, the subscribe button is right there, and it genuinely helps more than you'd think. Drop a comment with the strangest dream you've ever had, because after everything you just heard, it probably wasn't as random as it felt. And if you want to go even deeper into what your brain is doing while you're not paying attention, that video's linked right after this one.